Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament, looking at the New Testament church. And today we are looking at Jude 1, the only chapter in Jude, but Jude 3 through 16. And this is the looking at the danger of false teachers. And so Jude really gets into this and gets straight to the point. So we will do that. This is a little bit longer than most of our reads, but we're going to go through it anyway. It says, "Dear friends, I've been eagerly planning to write you about the salvation we all share, but now I find that I must write about something else, urging you to defend the faith that God has entrusted once for all time to his holy people. I say this because some ungodly people have wormed their way into your churches, saying that God's marvelous grace allows you to live immoral lives. The condemnation of such people was recorded long ago, for they have denied our holy master and Lord Jesus Christ. So I want to remind you, though you already know these things, that Jesus first rescued the nation of Israel from Egypt, but later he destroyed those who did not remain faithful. And I remind you of the angels who did not stay within the limits of authority God gave them, but left the place where they belonged. God has kept them securely chained in prisons of darkness, waiting for the great day of judgment. And don't forget Sodom and Gomorrah and their neighboring towns, which were filled with immorality and every kind of sexual perversion. Those cities were destroyed by fire and serve as a warning of the eternal fire of God's judgment. In the same way, these people who claim authority from their dreams live immoral lives, defy authority, and scoff at supernatural beings. But even Michael, one of the mightiest of the angels, did not dare accuse the devil of blasphemy, but simply said, "The Lord rebuke you." This took place when Michael was arguing with the devil about Moses' body. But these people scoff at things they do not understand. Like unthinking animals, they do whatever their instincts tell them, and so they bring about their own destruction. What sorrow awaits them, for they follow in the footsteps of Cain, who killed his brother. Like Balaam, they deceive people for money, and like Korah, they perish in their rebellion. When these people eat with you in your fellowship meals, commemorating the Lord's love, they are like dangerous reefs that can shipwreck you. They are like shameless shepherds who care only for themselves. They are like clouds blowing over the land without giving any rain. They are like trees in autumn that are doubly dead, and for they bear no fruit and have been pulled up by the roots. They are like wild waves of the sea, churning up the foam of their shameful deeds. They are like wandering stars doomed forever to blackest darkness. Excuse me. Enoch, who lived in the seventh generation after Adam, prophesied about these people. He said, "Listen, the Lord is coming with countless thousands of his holy ones to execute judgment on the people of the world. He will convict every person for all the ungodly things that they have done and for all the insults that ungodly sinners have spoken against them. These people are grumblers and complainers, living only to satisfy their desires. They brag loudly about themselves and they flatter others to get what they want." And it's unfortunate because what we see Jude talking about here, we honestly, this is he's talking about false teachers in the church, people in the church, and unfortunately, we see this. All right, we see this. I've experienced it. You've probably experienced it if you've been in the church just for a little while. It's people who, you know, come up as especially leaders or teachers in the church, but really they're only concerned about themselves, right? They're only concerned about what they can get at it, what how they can improve their position, how they can make themselves look good, and they're willing to, you know, teach anything almost, or change their mind on their teachings quite a bit, right? One minute they're against something, but when it benefits them, well, then they're going to be for that, right? And so you've probably witnessed that if you've been around in the church very long as well, and so or been around false teachers for sure. And so in this place, right? To start this out, in this place typically is where there's a place of thanksgiving, right? Where it's, the writers usually say, this is who's writing. I'm thankful for you. No, Jude just goes straight into the message and comes out the point that he gets straight to the central purpose here, and it's false teaching and it's false teachers, right? They were potent danger to the faith of his readers, right? He's like, look, these people are dangerous and you need to be aware of them. And they were abusing God's marvelous grace by saying that it allows us to live immoral lives in constant temptation, right? They're basically saying that because of God's grace, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about it. And then we know that that's not true, right? God's grace covers a lot of our errors, a lot of our human mess ups, a lot of everything, but not to those who just continually do it on purpose and say, hey, God's grace will cover me. That's not Christ like. That's not living like a Christian. And God and Jude warns them, right? He warns them and says, right, remember Jesus, right? The pre-existing Jesus rescued these people from Israel, right? I'm sorry, rescued the people of Israel from Egypt, and then later destroyed them because they were unfaithful, right? Because they didn't follow. They saw him do all these things, but yet they continued to not stay faithful. And then after rescuing the nation of Israel, God led them to the promised land. But because they didn't trust the Lord to protect them, they wouldn't go and take it. And so because of unbelief, God sent us the entire generation, right? Except for Josh and Caleb to wander in the wilderness until they died. It's like, hey, remember that, right? And then he talks about the angels, right, referring to the fall of Satan. More than likely, this is what most scholars think, and his angelic followers, those who, supernatural angels who were evil. And so we don't have a really super clear Old Testament passage about this, but this is, just studying that and external literature. That's what we can kind of come to. It's probably referring to Genesis 6, right, where Jewish tradition understood that the sons of God would to be the wicked angels and viewed their intercourse with women, human women, as the cause of a lot of judgment. Eventually, the flood. Then it's something you can dive into. And then he quotes Enoch. And if you're not familiar with Enoch, right, he was, he talks about him being in a generation of Adam, and Enoch wrote about a lot of things. Enoch's book's not in the Bible, and I'll be honest with you, I've never read the book of Enoch. Apparently, there's a lot of interesting things in there, a lot of more like sci-fi type. I would say sci-fi, but very supernatural type stuff. And there's some reasons it's not in the Old Testament for that reason, and because there's some inconsistencies and stuff that just didn't follow with the Old Testament, with the Bible, and so that's why it's not in there. But there's Enoch did exist. We know Enoch did exist. We don't know that if Enoch actually did write the book of Enoch, and so there's some questions there. But anyways, he talks about supernatural being literally the glorious ones, and these would have been the evil angels, right? So Jude knew enough of Enoch to quote from him. And so the false teachers here were probably downplaying the reality of judgment to come. They were downplaying it, or they were denying the glorious origin of the fallen angels, either one, right? But we know that Enoch was an early descendant of Adam, right? And so the comment in Genesis 5:24 apparently means that Enoch did not die. So one of the things about Enoch is that he was taken up directly to heaven. He did not die. And so we see them talking about these things of the warnings of false teachers and what they would come. And there's just this extraordinary condemnation that's going to come from God, and the complete silence of Scripture about him. It makes Enoch an interesting character, fascinating character, because there's a lot we just don't know about him. But Jude apparently knew enough about him to write about him, so that, and we know that there's a number of legends about him in Jewish literature, and at least two books that are of apocalyptic visions, and they were written between the Old Testament and New Testament, and they're attributed to him. So again, like I said, we don't know for sure or what they do, but there's this warning, this condemnation that comes from false teachers, and we see in this last verse. I think this sums it up, right? These people are grumblers and complainers, living only to satisfy their desires. They brag loudly about themselves, and they flatter others to get what they want. And we've got to watch for that. We've got to watch for those type of people, especially in church, and especially in church leadership, for sure. But this is the idea of false teachers, like teachers in the church. People, and typically teachers in the church are some sort of leader in the church. And so we've got to be careful. We've got to learn to speak up. This is the one thing I think that's bothered me throughout my entire walk. Like most of y'all know, I've been a Christian from the time I was a kid, an infant. All right, I say a Christian. I'm sorry. I was born and raised in the church. I've been a Christian since I think I was in third grade, second or third grade, when I gave my life to Christ. And so, we see these things, and one of the things that I think is bothering me more thing is we see people, especially sometimes leaders, who either teach things that are wrong, or live in such a way that's wrong, but the church is afraid to speak up. Right? They're afraid to confront them. And Jude talks about these people, right? It's like they're having communion with you. They're like reeds. like these sharp reefs under the water that destroy ships. He's like, and if you don't take care of this, if you don't do something about it, it's going to destroy you. You can't just sit around and be like, oh well, those things aren't going to do anything to me, because they do, right? If they're part of your church and they're part of your congregation, if they're your leaders and they're living ways and doing things they should not be doing, then it needs to be called out. You need to do something about it. And that's your responsibility as a member of the church. And unfortunately, too many people, if there's then this mindset that say, well, we don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to cause problems. Well, while in the meantime, you're allowing people to destroy the church, and or at least destroy the name of the church for sure. And so we've got to make sure that we learn to speak up. We've got to not allow these type of things to happen, because I honestly believe at a point you become just as guilty. If you know something's going on and you don't do something about it, or say something, or speak up, or if you do speak up and nothing changes or nothing's done and they continue to be allowed to do the things they're doing, and you don't leave, right? Then in the end, you become responsible for that. You can say, well, that's not, I'm not. No, you are. And so we've got to make sure that we speak up, that we do these things, that we do what's right. Now, I'm not talking about people, hey, I'm a leader. Leaders are going to mess up, right? I'm a leader in the church. I mess up every day. But I'm talking about this type of behavior that's being called out here. That is, it's not, oh, I messed up, I'm a sinful person, I made the mistake. It's, they're choosing to live a certain way. They're tearing people down to lift themselves up. They're teaching things they know is not true, in order to try to keep things a certain way, or to keep certain people down, and that kind of stuff. And so that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about in the church. And we've got to be very, very proactive in making sure that we don't allow this to happen, or allow it to continue on, because that's not what the church is supposed to be. And so we need to make sure we do that. So I know I went on this one, but this is important. I mean, Jude wrote a whole letter just for this purpose, because he understood how important it was and how bad it could destroy a church. I've seen it. I've seen entire churches go from being just growing and fruitful and going, and then they like some bad people are allowed to come in and do things, and the things are overlooked, and before you know it, that church is gone, right? Or a fraction, or just a shell of what it used to be, and then it stays that way. And so we've got to make sure we're proactive. We don't allow false teachers, and we got to be careful of ourselves. Like, one of the things I've always said is, don't just believe something because I get them to say it. Verify it, look it up, question me. If you don't agree with me, let me know. Say, hey man, I don't agree with that. I think maybe this is what this means. I love that kind of discussion. That's how we grow. And it keeps this idea, this thing of, I'm going to get up and you're going to listen and say, what I say is goes, right? And you can't question it, and you have to do what I say, and you have to listen to the word I preach and all that stuff. No, that's not the way this works. We're to study the word as individuals, not just, oh well, my preacher or my pastor got up there and said this, so this is what it means. No, right? Research it, study it. We've got so many tools available to us now that previous generations that didn't have, where you can dive into the study of stuff. Man, the diving into things you can do with AI. You gotta be careful with it a little bit, but gosh, the stuff you can do diving into things with AI. You don't have to be a scholar anymore. You don't have to be a genius in the Greek. You can look this stuff up on your own and say, hey, well, and question and dive into the scriptures and get the true meaning of what's going on and the true context. And we don't have to, we should no longer be living in an age where it's like, well, I really can't understand this, or I don't really have the time to grab down into this or that stuff, because we have so many easy resources now to look these things up. And so anyways, I know I've gone a while on this one, but this is important to me. This one is close to my heart, because as a preacher's kid and someone who's grew up in the church, I've seen this play out quite a few times. And so it's important not to allow these type of things to happen, and make sure that we don't allow false teachers and people who are just looking out for themselves or trying to promote themselves and within the church to be able to do that. So as always, I hope that you learn from this one. Tomorrow we will look at The call then to remain faithful. We see a call to false teachers, watch out for the danger of false teachers, and then the call to remain faithful. We'll do that, and then there's a quick conclusion and toward the end of the week. I think on Thursday or Friday for Jude, and then we will transition into First John. So, as always, I hope you've learned something. I encourage you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. That way you can continue to follow us. And as always, I appreciate everyone who takes the time to watch, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.